Hey everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, hanging out at the original Texana Ranch tonight, where we're starting off the Institute of Higher Pondology. Looks like we got some company walking up the gate. Look at there. There's Clint Steffens, his entourage. There's Donnie Roberts, who owns the place. And it's a beautiful, beautiful setting here. And we've got, I think, like 10 or 12 people that are here that are going to be studying about ponds and lakes and fish and aquatic plants. And I see Todd Austin checking in. So if you guys have some questions, throw them at me. What I thought I'd do tonight is talk about some of the basics of pondology. So what we're going to do with this course in the next 2.5 days is we're going to be talking about all the fundamentals about pond management. We're going to be talking about fish stocking. We're going to be talking about aquatic weeds and water. And for those of you that watch this show pretty often, you know that I talk a lot about water. And look at there. Hey, say hi, Clint.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, guys.
Look at there.
Hi.
There we go. So, anyway, that's Clint Steffens, who's been a guest on this show before, and we've talked about building lakes and ponds and things, and he's going to make a presentation on Friday morning. So we're doing a little meet and greet tonight. So everybody's over there drinking a little bit of beer, wine, and some water and soft drinks and eating some hors d'oeuvres that Debbie put together. Hello, Kenny Sanderson, Mike Cottrell. Good to see you guys. Let's see who all we got. Todd Austin, Justin Ludwig, Scott, good evening from Missouri. That's right. Brad Brentley. Travis Smith is on board. Good to see you guys. Let's see. Monty Waddell. Good to see Monty. So if you guys got questions, throw them at me. Tim Stewart, we're doing the Institute of Higher Pondology, and you're not here. Hello, Tommy Garrett. Good to see you. So anyway, what I thought I'd start off with tonight till you guys start pitching some questions at me was talking about water quality. You know, when I start talking about pond management, always start off talking about water. Look at there, Jay Spires from Floyd, Virginia. Good to see you, buddy. So when I start talking about water, the main thing I want to drive home is that we want to do everything we can to make sure that medium is healthy for fish. Hello, Jim Allen. Good to see you from Kentucky. John Moore from Kentucky. Doug Cusick checking in. Let's see what else we got here. Sean and Raquel Duncan. Good deal. Yeah, I got a trim. Yep, I did. Debbie made me. Since we're going to have an event, she made me go get a trim. Stopped into a sports clip somewhere, and they did it. So I start off talking about water. If your water's not happy, nothing else matters. But, you know, it took me probably 20 years doing it for a living before I really understood the value of water chemistry and how it relates to biology of a lake. Because, you know, when you have plants in there, they're photosynthesizing and respiring, and they're taking up oxygen or creating oxygen, taking up carbon dioxide, giving off, you know, different kinds of gases, and the water expels those gases, and some of those gases change the pH of the water. You know, and there's certain kinds of plants that grow, for example, like Cara, skunk grass. If that water doesn't have calcium carbonate in it, Cara's not going to grow. And so whenever I see Cara, I know the alkalinity is pretty high. But if the alkalinity is marginal and there's Cara growing, you can see pH spikes. You know, so paying attention to the water is a big, big deal to me. And so I think it should be a big deal to you. Now, are you going to understand water chemistry? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. But here's what I know. If you look for indicators are like the water making a drastic change in color, or fish behavior changing. If your fish have been eating and then all of a sudden they're not. You know, if the water goes from a vibrant green to a dusky brown, you know, you can judge it by smells. You can judge it by color. And the time of the year is whether or not the color of water sends a red flag up to me. And to you, if you've got a really vibrant plankton bloom, an algae bloom going on in April, that's not a big deal. But if you look and your water's lime green in August, that can be a big deal, you know, because that could be blue-green algae there in August. So there's a lot of things that you got to pay attention to, but the main point I want to drive home on that topic is that you really want your water to be happy. Once the water's happy, it's the medium, fish can live in it. But I'll tell you I'll tell you a little story. Hello, Michael Gray, Brad Cates. Let's see who else we got here. What am I missing? There's Sharmus Blake. Good to see Sharmus. He comes on. Reed Coleman, good to see you. Kenny Sanderson asks, what causes fin rot? Mainly tail fins on some of my walleye and yellow perch. I'll tell you what happens there. Hey, there's Richard Dagus. Yep, Bradley Crowley. Good to see you guys. Hey, Frank, from the drought-stricken pond in East Texas. Yeah, I get that. Steven Stupa. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that question. Wouldn't be Wednesday if I didn't ask about the Queen and grandkids. Well, the Queen is holding court right over there in that building, right over there. She's laid out a nice spread of heavy hors d'oeuvres and charcuterie boards and cheeses and stuff like that. She's having a big time. And I do think she's got a glass of red wine over there somewhere. But it's going to be really, she's having a ball. And the grandkids, they're stellar. Debbie will go from here, pick one up, haul that one home, and I'm going to run to Mississippi and work on a lake near Belzoni here in a few days. What causes fin rot? What causes fin rot? Fin rot occurs. There's several things about it. So here's what happens. There's a stressor. And the stressor could be because fish are overcrowded and the water quality deteriorates. The fish, maybe the oxygen drops or ammonia rises or something happens with the water quality almost every time. And what happens is the way the fish fights it is with the slime. The slime coating of the fish is its first line of defense against diseases and stressors. Well, once the water does what it does to break down some of that slime on the fish, it breaks it down first around the fins. So now there's a number of reasons that fin rot can be caused. Most of the time it's caused from a bacterial infection that attacks at the weakest place, which is the fins. And then as the fish swims, that bacteria spreads and it can attack the fins. Now, the rot comes in because the bacterial infection doesn't heal, and then oftentimes the fin becomes covered with a fungus called saprolegnia. And once that happens, it looks like there's a kind of fuzzy film, a fuzzy coating on the fins. And it's real. I see it happen with walleye. I see it happen with yellow perch. To a lesser extent, it happens with bluegill and largemouth bass. I've also seen it on grass carp before, but it's typically happens where fish are crowded. That's where it typically happens, especially if they're confined in a facility that's not a pond, like a concrete tank or a fiberglass tank or something like that. That's where I typically see fin rot. Now, I'm not going to tell you it doesn't occur in ponds because I do see it occur in ponds, but it's typically a small percentage. So that's about the best I can tell you about that. Michael Gray hanging out over there in Tennessee. Brad Cates, Doug Brown. Frank says, if a pond is 3 feet low, how does this change the water chemistry? Does it become more alkaline? It has to start off with alkalinity or have limestone added to it to become more alkaline. So what happens when a pond drops 3 feet due to evaporation, and here's a really interesting fact. If you start doing the math, on the majority of ponds, the top 3 feet of water is the same volume of water as the entire rest of a pond. So if your pond, Frank, is dropped 3 feet low, then the water chemistry doubles in its value. So if there's if you have 100 parts per million total alkalinity and half the water evaporates, now you're at 200 parts per million total alkalinity. And so the there they go. Yep. And so what happens then is like the iron amount doubles, or the alkalinity, the hardness, whatever is dissolved into that water doubles until it gets to saturation, and then it begins to precipitate out. So that's what happens, and yes, a pond typically becomes more alkaline unless it doesn't have any alkalinity to start. Let's see what we got going on here. If you can't tell, I'm holding my phone. Drew Bachman, I'm loving Beyond the Basics. Beyond the Basics is a book that I wrote. Actually, I wrote that book in 2017, and it took me until about a year ago So I guess 2021, to where I could sit down and go through over 16,000 pictures to pick out the 100 plus photos that I wanted to go in that book. So then there's a mosquito. So I got that book published, and it's, I don't remember how much it is, $30 or something. It's on the Pond Boss store, if you want to take a look at it. Scott Groons, Leah Groons is asking, is aeration an all or nothing? Yes, I'm going to tell you this. I got a question. Somebody emailed me a question the other day. Or maybe this was on the show last week. Can I aerate part of the pond? No, you can't. Because here's the theory. Here's what aeration does. Aeration mixes the water vertically from top to bottom. So if if a pond is stratified, say at 6 feet, all the water below 6 feet is cold. It's devoid of oxygen. So if your aeration system can't penetrate half the thermocline, then it's typically regurgitating only toxic water, pushing that up to the top. So it's not effective. It's not efficient. So if you're going to aerate a pond, I would go with one of the companies, like Vertex, Casco. Oh gosh, I tell you what, go to the Pond Boss resource guide at pondboss.com. And when you go to the resource guide, you'll see aeration. There's 6 or 8 really good companies in there. And give them a call and let them design an aeration system for your pond. Because what they'll do is they'll go on Google Earth and figure out how big around it is, or how many acres it covers. Then they'll have a conversation with you about the depths. So you need to know the depths. And then you can, at that point, begin to figure out what it would take to aerate a pond. And they'll design it for you. Okay, let's see here. Jill Jackson, first-year pond owner in Iowa, trying to learn what I need to do for the winter. Well, let's talk about winter just a little bit there, Jill. In the wintertime, if you're aerating, I would cut it off or talk to a fisheries pro that can help you adjust the way that you aerate. And here's why. If you aerate a pond in Iowa that typically ices over, it won't ice over. And so then what happens is when it ices over and you have these frigid days, then you've got a layer of ice, and that ice actually insulates the rest of the pond from getting too cold. Fish can stand water in the 40s and upper 30s, but if you get that whole pond chilled down to where it's just above freezing, 32.1, 33 degrees or whatever, that is real stressful on your fish. And so what we do typically with aeration is move the diffuser up closer to the shore, maybe in water 4 to 5 feet deep, and just kind of keep one hole open, let the rest of the pond freeze over. So there's some strategy there. The next thing is to be sure that if you've got a small pond, if you got a lot of aquatic plants, rake them out. Do that now if you can. And because what happens is when your pond ice is over, it typically doesn't have clear ice. And when that happens, you've got cloudy ice with snow on top of it. Then photosynthesis stops and those plants begin to use oxygen, so you're subject to a winter kill. Another thing, this fall before winter, if you need to cull some fish, because if you don't, nature's likely to do that over the wintertime. So that's the 3 things, and then get your equipment serviced. It's a good time to service your aeration system, good time to make sure your feeders are all in good shape. Now, I let my feeders run all winter long because I don't want mice crawling in there building nests. If a machine works all the time, every day like it's supposed to, you have less of a chance of it breaking. So let's see here. Tommy Garrett. Let's see what Tommy's got. Have a high flow rate that goes through my pond. The creek that feeds it's about 2 feet wide, and it's only about 1.25 acres big. How do you keep water quality in check with a situation like that? High flow rate. You know what? That water keeps itself in check. So one of the ways to keep water in check is to flow, is to get water moving. So if you have a high flow rate flowing through your pond that's 1.25 acres, that water quality is going to be consistent. Now, it may not be like you want it. When we managed Richmond Mill Lake over in North Carolina, the pH was 5.3. There was anywhere from 6 to 10,000 gallons per minute overflowing the spillway of that 125-acre lake. We weren't going to lime it. We weren't going to fertilize it because there was so much water going through that we couldn't. But the good thing was The water chemistry was stable. So what we did there was we replaced any nutrients we might try to grow on the water with fish food. And that lake it thrived. It was phenomenal for years and years and years, and it was because we kept it propped up with fish food. So the water quality, even though the water quality may not be great, as long as it's consistent and autonomous, that's a good thing. Even if the water chemistry is something we might not like, what we do like is the water's moving a lot. So I bet what I would do there is I would just do some water chemistry and monitor it. As long as the pH is pretty consistent and the alkalinity is consistent, even if the alkalinity is 0, then I would rather have moving water like that's consistent than having water with a low pH sitting still trying to manage that water chemistry. So that's my take on that. Debbie McMillan Duckworth, good to see you. Jamie Stamper, good to see you. Let's see. Jamie, you're welcome. Central Kentucky, good to see you. John Pearson. Kenny Sanderson, those fish are in my pond. I'm going to guess that they're crowded, Kenny, with tail rot. One thing, I get in trouble for saying this sometimes, but I'm going to say it anyway. If the tail rot was started by a bacterial infection, it's my recommendation to feed them some medication. And if they're feeding, then it ought to be clicking. You guys stand by 1 minute here. I got something going on. Yep, I'm going to have to go pay attention to this pondology stuff. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to have to go. I got an issue I got to go deal with. So hey, listen, I'm gonna clock out because I need to go pay attention to the pondology guys. So I will circle back with you here in a week, and I'll be doing that. Actually, I'll be in Mississippi working on a lake. So we'll see you then. I'm going to go ahead and say adios. And I see some questions popping up. When I get a chance later on this evening, I'll type an answer. So we will see you before long. I'll see you next Wednesday. Adios.